Okay, hi everyone. I'm Kelly Guilloux, co-founder of Running for Research Prader-Willi syndrome. My apologies, my camera is not functioning, um, but you'll just have to listen to me closely then. I'm excited to welcome you all today to today's webinar, Measuring What Matters, Goal Attainment Scaling for Prader-Willi Syndrome. Our presenters today are Maria Piccone, CEO and co-founder of Trend Community, Ganesh Sevinch, Director of Patient-Centered Outcomes, Ardea Outcomes, Dr. Jennifer Miller, Professor of Pediatric Endocrinology at the University of Florida and co-founder of Running for Research, and Dr. Amy Ravana, Associate Professor of Pediatrics at Texas Children's Hospital. The goal of today's session is to raise awareness about the goal inventory tool for the PWS community. This initiative began through a collaboration between Dr. Jennifer Miller, Trend Community, and Ardea Outcomes to develop a new clinical outcome assessment tool. Thanks to the fundraising efforts of Running for Research, support from the community, and a grant from Harmony Biosciences, we've been able to engage the PWS community and its key opinion leaders in this process, ensuring that their voices are heard. Now I'd like to turn things over to Maria.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. My name is Maria Piccone, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Trend Community. Oh, I'm on mute. Uh-oh.
No, you're fine. I can hear
Oh,
you.
sorry. I thought someone said I was on mute. Sorry. Trend is a community-powered data analytics company, and our bold vision is to revolutionize the world's understanding of diseases. My husband, Chris, and I co-founded Trend after our first child was diagnosed with Prader-Willi syndrome. And after joining an online community of caregivers of children with PWS, we realized that there was a big gap between what we'd read about PWS in the medical literature and what appeared to be possible for a kid born today with this rare condition. At Trend, we analyze conversations from those online support groups and across social media to broaden our understanding of the lived experiences of patients and their caregivers. Using this approach, we played a key role in connecting Prader-Willi syndrome to another rare disease, narcolepsy. And we've been working over the years with doctors Amy Ravana and Dan Glaze at Texas Children's Hospital to shed light on this under-recognized symptom. Next slide, please. If you've invested your time and resources in treating or driving research for the PWS community, you know that standardized clinical outcome assessments consistently fail to capture meaningful change in our complex population. Goal attainment scaling, or GAS for short, is a validated methodology for measuring progress toward individualized and personalized goals. It provides a structured yet flexible approach to assessing outcomes in clinical, educational, and therapeutic settings. In 2023, the FDA recognized GAS in its patient-focused drug development draft guidance number 4, and this compelled us to launch this important initiative. Next slide, please. We teamed up with Dr. Miller and Running for Research, Ardea Outcomes, a patient-focused CRO that specializes in adapting and implementing GAS across therapeutic areas, and Combined Brain, a consortium for outcome measures and biomarkers for neurodevelopmental disorders. We started this process with an in-depth literature review. In partnership with Combined Brain, we coded 225 journal articles. This was a monumental task, and we thank all of the analysts and interns who participated in this effort. The findings from the literature review informed the first draft of the inventory. Ardea then interviewed 6 expert clinicians, including a pediatric endocrinologist, a child and adolescent psychiatrist, a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, a geneticist and special care pediatrician, a pediatric gastroenterologist, and an associate professor in pediatrics with a focus in sleep medicine in PWS. These interviews informed draft 2 of the inventory. For me, the most exciting part of this project were the interviews with PWS families. Ardea's research associate interviewed 30 families, including the person living with PWS. 5 of those interviews were part of the cognitive debriefing phase to ensure that the list of goal areas reflects the full range of outcomes relevant to our population. We obtained genetic confirmation of PWS for all participants and stratified according to sex, genetic subtypes, and age group. The final goal inventory is now ready for prime time, and we're looking for early adopters. Now I'm going to hand it over to Ganesh and Ardea, who will dive a little deeper into goal attainment scaling and how it's implemented.
Thank you very much, Maria, and hello, everyone. I would like to start by saying thank you, everyone, for this collaboration, to our funders, Trend community, more importantly, our participants. And again, from the partnership perspective, it was a very exciting partnership, and we are thrilled to have this inventory for you, ready for use. And I also would like to say we had very ambitious goals in terms of recruitment, strict stratification criteria, and we're able to achieve those goals thanks to the PWS community. So Ardea Outcomes is a contract research organization specialized in personalized outcome assessments, particularly in goal attainment scaling. And in this webinar, I will briefly talk about goal attainment scaling and introduce you goal inventories, which is a tool that increases rigor in the implementation of goal attainment scaling. So what is goal attainment scaling? It is initially developed in California in 1960s for mental health care planning, but it has since been adapted for patient-centered outcomes research and has demonstrated potential in evaluating meaningful change. And recently, interest has grown significantly in this personalized endpoint, especially recently with patients-focused drug development guidances. And I should note that the implementation of GAS may still vary depending on its context of use, the research question, whether it's used in clinics or clinical research. So our group focuses on GAS implementation in clinical development, and here I am showing how we deploy it in clinical research. So there are 2 types of visits. First is the goal setting visit. This is the visit where the clinician or someone with expertise in the disease facilitates the interview with the patient and or caregiver to identify 3 or more goal areas that are meaningful to them, but are also expected to improve with the treatment. And again, not just any goals should be meaningful to the patient, related to the therapeutic area, and have a reasonable chance of being influenced by the intervention. Then for each goal area together, they build a 5-point goal attainment scale. On the right-hand side, you see a template of this scale. So the scale development begins with identification of patient's baseline status in that goal area, the -1 level, and continues with defining the expected outcome or the goal, which is level 0. And then the remaining levels, +1, somewhat better than expected, +2, much better than expected, then at -2 at the bottom, which is much worse than expected. Of course, ultimately, the goal scale should be SMART, which means specific, measurable, realistic, relevant to the condition and treatment, and also time-bound. And of course, this scale has to have certain psychometric qualities. Then, next step is the follow-up visit or visits. This is where the goal attainment scale using the goal attainment is scored, assessed using the 5-point scale developed at baseline. So for each goal, the clinician and caregiver or the patient first discuss the patient's current status concerning that goal. Then they refer back to the scale and each rate level of goal attainment considering the scale level. So, and then each give a rating, and we recommend getting rating from both caregiver and the clinician, caregiver or patient and the clinician, and typically conduct a sensitivity analysis with clinician rating and explore where and how it diverges from the caregiver rating. Of course, we also recommend setting at least 3 goals per patient. And of course, the number of goals may vary. Then there's a standardized formula that is used to calculate goal attainment scores across multiple goals. This means the GAS gives you a single GAS score for each individual that measures change in areas what matters most to them. Scores can also be summarized across multiple goal areas so that goal achievement for each goal domain can be explored. And of course, scores can be summarized across patients for each treatment arm so that the treatment efficacy can be measured. Next slide, please. So this is where the value of goal attainment scaling lies. So it first gives you qualitative insights. So when you ask patients what's important to them and each set 3 goals, and if there are 100 patients, you get 300 data points around goals or around signs and symptoms revealing what's important to them. In that sense, GAS not only provide insights into patient experience, but also reveal treatment priorities and offer a framework to identify unmet treatment needs. And of course, these unmet treatment needs are critical for heterogeneous diseases like conditions like PWS. And as I said, there's also a quantitative score revealing treatment efficacy. So to what extent the goals have met will give you a quantitative score of its goal achievement, which gives you an answer to the question, is the intervention working? And then you can also conduct a secondary analysis around where the signal is coming from. So you can dive into those goals, which goals were set and which goals most likely to be achieved. And then by exploring which goals were consistently achieved, you can get an answer as to how, as to whether if the intervention is working, but also how the intervention is working. This means GAS allows a systematic investigation of unknown treatment effects might arise. And for pharma attendees, we typically say GAS is essentially a bridge between your COA strategy and your PRO strategy. Next slide, please. So of course, key advantages, it's foremost, it's patient-centered. As you may imagine, individual disease experience, that is the challenges associated with each symptom and the lived experience of a symptom are unique to each patient. So instead of using a traditional standardized outcome assessment where you would rate each patient on a standardized list of items, GAS allows you to ask the patients, what does better look like to you? What matters most to you? And this in and of itself results in a robust understanding of what's important to them. And according to the guidances from the FDA, again, the importance of the endpoints to patients or caregivers need to be justified. And GAS is by definition relevant to the patients and captures patient experience, thus removes the heavy lifting on the front and back end of drug development. And directly quoting from patient-focused drug development guidance is that personalized endpoint have several advantages, such as they are very patient-focused in their attempt to reflect how each patient feels or functions in terms of what's important to them at baseline. And because the goal scales are developed around what was identified as the problem areas in the first place, there is no dilution of the treatment effect due to mixing affected and unaffected patients. This renders GAS as highly responsive. And there's also the discussion around clinical meaningfulness, and GAS bypasses these discussions too, because it is inherently clinically meaningful, because the clinician is involved in identification of these goals. And they are also meaningful to the patients and caregivers and non-arbitrary. And the non-arbitrariness comes from the fact that the threshold is not standardized, you don't need to justify the threshold for clinical meaningfulness because you directly develop that clinical meaningful threshold considering the drug at hand, the treatment goals, and the patient's unique baseline state. So the problem of arbitrariness is is overcome. Okay, then we want to see patient perspective. So why don't we just ask them a simple question? Did this drug work for you? And again, there are tools like that called patient global impression of change or severity. So there's a reason why gas is better compared to those measures, because these measures are known to be prone to bias. So the patient may not remember, or as they feel better, their understanding of what better means might change. It's called recall bias or response, and the first one is recall bias, and the other one is called response drift. So gas minimizes recall bias and or other biases typically associated with other patient-centered outcome measures. So next slide, please. So of course, gas has several benefits, including being highly responsive and individualized. There's a risk, and there is a risk of inconsistency because you are constructing a personalized endpoint during the gas process. Therefore, the process of constructing a personalized endpoint should be standardized so that it is consistent across sites and clinicians and patients. So FDA referred to this method, of course, but they also mentioned the need to increase rigor. And one way to increase rigor is goal inventories. Of course, there are the rigor of gas can be improved in several ways, including the training the clinicians on how to conduct gas, patient orientation, the use of an electronic clinical outcome assessment tool, and also with goal inventories. So goal inventories are essential to both the training and the digital platform, digitization of the implementation of gas. So why are goal inventories essential, or what are goal inventories? First of all, they are lists of goals, symptoms, and challenges that are identified by patients and clinicians, and that are condition-specific and uniquely developed for each study protocol. They are a key component of gas implementation in clinical research, and first, because they first serve as a tool for clinician training. That is, they guide the clinicians in setting realistic, smart goals that can be potentially influenced by the intervention. Goal inventories also support patient and caregiver orientation, and they help them understand the goal setting process and treatment outcomes being targeted. The next one, they can be embedded in the electronic data capture platforms that is configured for each study to minimize inconsistencies across different clinicians performing gas interviews. And lastly, they are essential to provide additional data insights in quantifying the treatment response per goal domain. This is critical for the systematic investigation of the unknown treatment effects. For this purpose, predefined goal areas and domains are essential. On the next slide, there are two publications from the case study. We developed a goal inventory for Down syndrome associated Alzheimer's disease. And as you may imagine, evaluating health outcomes in Down syndrome is challenging due to variability in baseline function and cognition, and it is even more compounded by dementia onset. So personalized outcome assessments such as goal attainment scaling can address this and capture treatment responses across varying baseline states and varying symptom manifestations. So here we first developed a goal inventory with input from caregivers, and then we went to the clinicians, and then we get their input, and then we have reported the results in these two publications. And then we didn't stop there. We went on to conduct a feasibility study where we tested the feasibility of the goal inventory. And in that, this is fresh out, very new. Early results of the feasibility study, it's like 46 caregivers set 138 goals, and over 90% of the goals were chosen from the inventory. Now, the Down syndrome population has an inventory adapted for them for use, and then they can use it. They have a ready-for-use tool to standardize the process of goal-scale development across sites and patients. And of course, we now also have a goal inventory for PWS. We did develop it using a similar approach, similar and more vigorous approach, and develop this ready-for-use tool to support the adaptation of gas for PWS. And I will let next speaker introduce why this work matters.
Thank you, Ganesh. I'm actually, why does this work matter? I wanted to just say we are grateful to Dr. Miller, Running for Research, for funding this work. And Dr. Miller, I know you have to drop off a bit early to get to clinic, but before you go, could you please share with the audience why you spearheaded this project?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Trend and Ardea for doing all this work. It was, as Maria said, it was a massive undertaking, and we are very well aware of that. And we're very grateful that they were willing to work with us to get this done. So the reason this work matters is because, as most people know, there's one drug that's FDA approved right now for the treatment of Prader-Willi syndrome, and that's growth hormone. And it's great. It helps with cognition, it helps with growth and metabolism and all the things, but it doesn't help treat the core symptoms of Prader-Willi syndrome, which are the ones that are most life-limiting, things like hyperphagia, behaviors, narcolepsy, as Maria mentioned. And so we felt the need to, because every drug trial that's been done has focused solely on one goal, which is hyperphagia. And as you can see on the slide, there's been 8 late-stage drug trials that have been done, and all but one, and that one is still before the FDA right now, have failed with a single goal and single outcome measure as the end for the study. Endpoint for the study, I know what I meant. And the standardized measures, as I said, don't really capture what all is going on in the day-to-day life of individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome and their families. So we want to use these personalized outcome measures to use for future clinical trials to address what really matters, what changes for the families and the patients with drugs that we use. Because while we may be using a drug, say, for example, for treatment of hyperphagia, or that would be the goal of the company, we can also, as clinicians, see improvements in anxiety and behaviors and obsessive compulsive behaviors and things like that. And the same could be true for sleep drugs and things. And so we really feel that these drugs, everything is so intermixed with Prader-Willi syndrome that we feel that we want to make sure that when we're doing drug trials, we're capturing all the things that matter to these individuals and their parents that are changing if the drug is working. And so we really want to optimize patient-centered care. All of you that know me know that that's a huge thing for me, is individualized care. And so I'm very excited that this measure has been developed and is ready to go. Now it's named, I'm probably going to cry, I'm sorry, the James Henson Jr. Prader-Willi Syndrome Goal Inventory. And James was my patient, who was a very brave warrior who had multiple medical issues and a very complicated healthcare odyssey, but really helped eliminate the path of therapeutic progress. And his family and him and everybody was really committed to accelerating science and research for Prader-Willi syndrome and for our community. And so I'm honored to dedicate this tool to James Henson Jr. and his family. Maria.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Next slide, please. So, as Ganesh explained, I'm going to just recap a little bit. A goal inventory refers to a comprehensive list of potential goals that are relevant to the individual or population being assessed. This inventory acts as a reference point for selecting and customizing specific measurable goals that align with the person's needs and circumstances. For the James Henson Jr. Goal Inventory, we identified 11 domains, and this graph shows the number of goal areas captured under each domain. So, for example, some goal areas under the behavioral domain were rigidity and skin picking. Under food focus, we captured hyperphagia, food anxiety, and stealing food, among others. And under the sleep domain, we captured sleep disturbances, narcolepsy, cataplexy, and central sleep apnea. This inventory will ensure that the goal selection is systematic, evidence-based, and aligned with best practices. It can be used to guide both the clinician and the individual in setting realistic, meaningful, and measurable goals. Upon request, we will make the complete inventory available to anyone who is interested, and to our pharmaceutical partners, the goal inventory serves as a foundational list of potential outcomes that can be customized based on the specific therapy studied, ensuring that selected goals align with the therapy's intended effects. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. This is I completely forgot this one. We also looked at the impacts on the person living with PWS and their family, and we had goal areas under 6 domains listed here. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, we've been working with Dr. Ravana for years to raise awareness around sleep issues in PWS. But Dr. Ravana has also used the GAS methodology in a clinical setting. Dr. Ravana, could you tell us about how you've leveraged goal attainment scaling in clinical practice? Oh, you're on mute.
That would help. Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this group and in this effort. Congrats to all the hard work and in making this happen. So as a clinician, Prader-Willi syndrome is multifactorial. There's multiple symptoms, and there's still a lot that has yet to be known about it. There's various phenotypes, genotypes that are coming out now. So I think that one of the challenges from a sleep pulmonary perspective is that sleep impacts a lot of things, not just behavior, but also social interactions, overall quality of life for the patient, but also for the caregiver and other family members as well. And so a lot of times addressing and identifying that sleep is an issue, it can be challenging because it's usually not the first thing that comes to mind as a priority. In families, usually it's hyperphagia or the food-seeking behaviors, right? And so there's really very limited number of validated tools that we can use to assess whether or not a child is sleepy or has sleep issues. So at this time, the ESS CHAD is the only validated tool that was studied in PWS. And this is a tool that is a series of questions in which we assess what their tendency of sleepiness is in various situations. And we use this at every clinic visit, and we basically use that as a way of an indication on whether or not our intervention is helping or not helping. The problem with this tool, though, is it's only daytime sleepiness, and we know that daytime sleepiness can present in various ways, especially in children. It can be irritability. It could be it could also present with more food-seeking behaviors, aggression, etc. And so with goal attainment scaling, this is more of an individualized approach to the setting. It's achieving specific sleep-related goals by pinpointing key concerns and tracking progress. And so what I mean by that is, what's important to a patient. So if you have a PWS child, stuttering might be more important to them versus the hyperphagia versus the sleep issues, versus as a parent, maybe it's both the sleep issues and the hyperphagia that are my 2 goals that I want to improve. And so this allows more of a comprehensive method to improve not only one symptom, or in my case, sleep, but also daily functioning for patients living with PWS and for the caregivers. And so because we make this a priority and we're individualizing their care, we're hoping that this will allow families as well as their patients to improve adherence to interventions and to allow the medical community to continue dedicating their future efforts to improve future research with the end goal of improving the overall quality of life for these patients. I'll turn it back to Maria.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ivana. So we are doing great on time. but we want to take the time now to open it up to for questions. Please raise your hand. I'll ask you to unmute to ask your question, or you can also share your questions in the chat. We can prioritize questions if there's anything specific for Dr. Miller because she will have to leave a little bit early. Also happy to give people some time back in their day if we do finish early. Any questions? So we have a question in the chat. It says, this tool now validated and is this tool now validated and can be used in clinical trials? Ganesh, can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So it's a personalized outcome assessment. So this is different than standardized tools. So the criteria for validation is different than the standardized tools. So we can. So the answer is yes. We do use these types of tools already in clinical trials. But it needs to be adapted for the specific clinical trial you are planning. So it needs to be tailored to the specific trial, specific context of use. So yes, you can use it.
Yeah, and I'd also like to say that now that we've adapted it for Prader-Willi syndrome, the goal would be for someone to incorporate it into a clinical trial so that then we would have some experience with the tool in a clinical trial focused on PWS. Thank you for that question. If anyone else on my team has anything to add to that, please feel free. Any other questions?
Hi, can I ask a question?
Please.
I am a mom to 7 months old. He has PWS. So I know a lot of the trial, is usually it's above 2 years old or 4 years old, 6 years old. So I just want to know, as parents to a much younger child cannot participate in trial yet. What can I do to contribute, for this tool? Like what, I wanna do my part, but I'm kind of lost. I don't know what to do.
Thank you. We could definitely share it and raise awareness, but Dr. Miller, do you want to add something more to that?
I don't really have anything more to add other than to say, I do think this can be used for, as we're doing earlier intervention trials and things for young children and infants. I think this absolutely can be a great tool to be used for those kind of clinical trials as well. Although we can't interview the child, we can, get goals that are important to parents for part of these early intervention trials. And so we can use it very effectively, I think, in some of these upcoming trials that we will have.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about the work that we did is I said we interviewed the family, so the caregiver and the individual with PWS, or if the child was too young to participate, then just the caregiver. I will say that our family has used this tool, this method, as we've tried new things, either new medicines or supplements, as a way to track what we kind of expect will happen, to see as kind of a gut check to see if the interventions are working. So something that we can explore, kind of educating the community on in the future. So we've got another question. Can the qualitative research used to create goal sets be conducted alongside or within qualitative research used to develop or select other clinical trial endpoints, or does it differ substantially?
I can take this, I guess. So thank you for this question. It's very valid. I think so. The short answer is yes. There is certainly an overlap between the questions we ask to develop to identify what matters most to patients overlaps with the qualitative research questions utilized to develop or select other clinical trial endpoints. Of course, there are differences, but no substantial ones. I should also add, So these goal inventories are not, unlike standardized tools, they just give you a subset of goals that are likely to be improved with the treatment at hand. But the patients can still set personalized goals. So they are not an exhaustive list of signs and symptoms. The personalization is still there whenever the patient feels like the inventory does not cover what they are experiencing individually. So in that sense, they differ from standardized instruments, and then we recommend that they are iterated. So we recommend pharmaceutical companies to start utilizing them early in clinical research, phase 2, phase 3, and then at each phase they are iterated and improved to better match what the drug is intended or the context of use.
Well, and the other thing that I love is as, fingers crossed, therapies start coming to market and the phenotype continues to shift, that it is a living document that we can continue to, cultivate. So that is also something that's really exciting. We got another question. How will this tool be rolled out to clinicians? And if they're not familiar with it, how will they be trained? So thank you for that. We're sort of at the tip of the spear here, rolling this out, really trying to motivate our pharmaceutical partners to incorporate it in clinical trials. But as we mentioned, it's certainly a very useful tool in a clinical setting. So we'll think about creating educational material for clinicians as well. But certainly, please, we'll share the inventory with the community. Encourage everyone to share this with their medical providers. And you can always connect them with Trend, and we are connected to Dr. Miller, Dr. Ivana, Ardea, and also many of the pharmaceutical companies. Anybody else have anything else? Dr. Ivana, did you have anything? Or
I hope that, in a year or two, if this is really something that most of us push forward and highlight, that it eventually becomes a tool that we can visualize on, maybe get some training, get a certification that's a few hours, get some CME through that, and then start applying it clinically. At least that's the vision that I have, because I think this is so individualized and can be helpful in so many specialties that I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I'm hoping that soon we'll have some more interest and get more education out there and awareness that you'll start to hear more about it.
And Dr. Ivana is publishing a case report. And so we were talking previously, as clinicians do utilize the tool, it would be great to publish more of these case reports and maybe do a series, and that way we get it into the medical literature. There was another question about how can we best bring this up with our child's medical team, and really, the more we can get this published, that's really both gives it credibility and we'll put it in front of the medical community. Jen, did you have something to say? You're good. So how would
sorry, can I add one more thing? This tool allows the families to become empowered to speak up to what's important to them. So I think hopefully we've empowered you guys as a caregiver to a PWS child, that this is your voice. This could be used as your voice to get the care and support that they need. So spreading that awareness is vital and crucial. So grateful that you have asked this question.
That was fantastic, because that's actually what I was going to say. It was exactly that. And I 100% agree. It really does empower parents. And as you all know, when you're the parent of a child with a rare disease, there's very little power that you have. And so I really think this is very great. It's going to be a great thing for families to be able to use.
Next question. Thanks for the questions. Awesome that we're having such engagement. How would you anticipate regulatory agencies use gas to support drug approval? I will say Dr. Miller talked about all of the trials that have failed, and I think, at least anecdotally, some of those therapies seem to be effective. And so hopefully, even with the standardized measures that we have, by incorporating gas as a secondary or co-primary endpoint, that there will be more data, like Dr. Miller said, around why the therapy is effective. Ganesh or Dr. Miller, did you want to add more to that?
Yeah, I can add, we are already utilizing gas in multiple clinical trials, and then recently like gas was part of the application. So in the PFDD drug, PFDD guidance is an initiative by the regulatory agencies. So they are very open. They are pushing for patient involvement, and as you can see, the change in signal, whatever biological signal, is not enough anymore. You need to show impacts in patients' lives around what matters most to them. So the regulatory agencies are actually looking for data that support this impact or change. And gas is a perfect tool to demonstrate that the change in whatever biological signal we are measuring is actually making a change in patients' lives. So I would assume that, of course, we do not yet have a case with an approved drug using gas, but I anticipate more and more in near future, I should say.
Well, and just to add on to that, I would say that, if we had a biomarker in Prader-Willi, it would be fantastic to be able to assess drug efficacy, but we don't have that. And so this is an add-on to, the one endpoint that is, validated and FDA accepted, which is very subjective, and based only on parent report, right? And so I think this method will actually really enhance clinical trials and the outcome of clinical trials for patients with Prader-Willi syndrome.
Thank you. I just wanted to share, Dr. Miller and Dr. Ivana, that someone just commented that this is going to be the microphone that we needed. So thought you'd appreciate that comment. Any other questions? So I'm going to feel free if there are more questions, continue to add them to the chat, but I'm just going to put my team on the spot and maybe we can just go around and, what is one message that you want to leave the audience with? Why don't we start with you, Jen, since you have to drop off first?
I'm sorry, I was distracted for a moment. What was the question?
Oh, sorry. I was putting everybody on the spot, asking what's one message you want to leave everyone with?
That goal attainment scaling should be the future for studies with Prader-Willi syndrome.
In general.
In general,
also
with all studies. I think with all studies, I mean, whether it's a drug study or a diet study or whatever you're going to do, I think this technique actually is going to apply so broadly across the board because of the way this was developed so comprehensively by you guys that I think that, yes, for all studies, Prader-Willi related, this has a place in those clinical trials.
I agree. And what a great opportunity this has been to really de-risk this for the pharmaceutical industry. We've essentially done the heavy lifting of creating that foundational goal inventory. So I would say there was a question, I think I missed it here. How will this tool be? It was about clinicians. There was something about training in a clinical trial. And, I think with any clinical trial, there's training that's required for the tools that are used. And so, as Dr. Ivana said, more and more as this is utilized. It'll be something familiar. But in the meantime, there are certainly companies like Ardea who have, specialize in gas and its implementation. Certainly you could reach out to us or to Ardea to get more information about how to best implement this in your study.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you very much, Maria. I was going to speak along the same line. It is really exciting, and your point around de-risking utilization of goal attainment scaling is very valid, and also speaks to the question around support from regulatory agencies. So this is a great tool, and it's really revolutionary in terms of providing subjective data in an objective way. So from even a philosophical measurement science perspective, this is revolutionary, and its implementation in clinical research requires certain rigor, and there are nuances in implementation. So the knowledge from the clinicians, the ability of clinicians in developing the goal scales need to be standardized, right? This is why you would need a rigorous training, and consider the like you are enrolling a clinical trial in 15 countries with multiple languages, so that there are the rigor that's needed to implement this in a clinical trial drug development world is different, and we are excited that we have this tool along with other methods to use to roll this in clinical development. But it is revolutionary, and I'm glad that we have conducted this work, and now the pharma has this tool to utilize to even more standardize and increase rigor in the implementation of goal attainment scaling.
Thank you. Dr. Ivana?
So I think we're all fighters in the PWS world. So I'm hoping that with this tool, it empowers us to keep fighting, keep identifying more symptoms, more phenotypes, more genotypes, more treatment options, as a way to focus what's important to you, as a parent, as a clinician, as a researcher, whoever you are. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think we have a great group of a sense of community, as well as a lot of people that are willing to help and dedicate their time to this tool. I foresee that eventually that this tool will be something that all specialties will eventually adapt, because of the fact, again, it's patient-centered, which is, as a clinician, that is the number one rule as a provider, as a clinician. And so it brings us back. So I feel like we're going back to the old days where you're focusing on the patient and not so much as the disease itself, but more of what's important to you as a parent, what's important to you as a patient.
I love that. Thank you. I can't see you, Kelly, but do you have any closing remarks?
I do actually. As I've been listening to this webinar, the thing that really just manifests itself with me is the immense sense of accomplishment and pride I feel for the PWS community, because without the fundraising efforts of everyone, we wouldn't have accomplished this. And funding it was not a small thing. It was a big thing. So I think all families and parents can take comfort in knowing that your actions are directly contributing to the way that research will move forward for our community. And so I'm just very proud and very grateful.
Thank you, Kelly. And, it felt like we were going slow. There was so much to do. But I was reminded that we did accomplish a lot in a pretty, short period of time. So I want to thank all of our speakers. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you to the community for entrusting your, funding dollars, in this team so that we could, do this important work. Currently, our greatest need is to implement this tool in clinical trials. I know we've said it a bunch of times, but if you have an upcoming trial or research study, or you just want to learn more, please email the Trend team at research@trend.community. Thank you.